of this tutorial is to show you how to add loops inside of Raptor. So what you're going to do is follow steps 1 through 15 on creating an entire program that will run multiple times and also accumulate values. So in step 1 you're going to create a new Raptor file that will do that, and then in step 2 we're going to start by adding a loop between the start and the end. So in my Raptor file, I'll go ahead and do that. I'm just going to add that, and we'll add the control to it in a few minutes. So the next step is to add our control, and that would be what we're going to end up with is something like this. Now ensure you add your variables as well, but what we're going to want to do in order to do that is add our condition. Now, before our condition can be asked, we have to ask a question. Now, in here, what we're going to do is ask, do you want to end the program? And we're going to very clearly tell the person what to do. So we'll say type yes or no. And you could say Y or N or whatever you'd like, but we're going to tell them very clearly, and we're going to put that into a variable called end program. Now this is going to be slightly different than our keep going variable in Raptor, and the only reason for that is because we don't have the ability to change the yes and the no in Raptor, so that'll be a little bit different than our pseudocode. So if they say yes, they want to end the program, you can see the program flow will end. If they type no, then what it'll do is start the loop over again. So what this condition should be is while end program is equal to yes. Now remember in Raptor, when we ask if something is equal to, it's one equal sign, and because end program is a string, then we're going to put double quotation marks around it. Now in step 6, what the program calls for you to do is to add your modules that you're going to have into the program. So there is a sample image of what it should look like, but in step 7 it starts by telling you to add a call to get bottles. And what the type of loop that we're structuring is really a do while loop, because we want to do these things while the user does not want to end the program. So we'll add a get bottles module. Now over in this module here, what we're going to do is add an input statement that asks the user to enter in the number of bottles returned for the day. So I'm going to add that. I'm sorry, let me delete that. Returning back to step 7, it says to add a loop between the start and the end. So we're going to add that loop in there. And then it also says to add a condition that says while the counter is greater than 7. So counter greater than 7. So we'll go ahead and add that in there. Now inside of the loop, what it asks us to do is an input that will have the user enter in the number of bottles for that day. So again, we'll say enter the number of bottles for today, and that's going into my today bottles variable. Now the next thing that we need to do is add an assignment statement that will accumulate our variables. And this process here does follow our pseudocode. So what we're doing is setting total bottles equal to total bottles plus today bottles. Now the next thing that we need to do, and this is a very common mistake, is remembering to increment our counter. So that is just simply counter equals counter plus 1. Now if we save our program and try running it, you're going to notice an error that occurs when we start running our Get Bottles module. So I'll just start running my program. We start today bottles, and we can put in a value, 45 for example. And then we get to total bottles. Now what it's saying is that total bottles doesn't have a value, and in fact even if we added that in, other variables do not have a value, such as counter. So say for example if we try to add 1 to counter, counter has no value. So what we need to do is to, before the start of this loop, is we need to initialize our variables to values. So we're going to add 3 assignment statements. The first one is going to set counter to a starting value. Counter equals 1. So now down here when we say 1 plus 1, it becomes 2 instead of 1 plus no value. Additionally, we're going to take total bottles, and we're going to set that to 0 so that it has a starting value. And then, just to get used to the process, we can also take today's bottles and equal that to 0. And now when we run our program and we see how our accumulation works, we'll be better able to keep track of those variables. So counter is 1, today bottles is 0, total bottles is 0, and then as we enter in our first value, let's go ahead and enter in some sample values from step 15, such as 346. That gets put into today bottles, added to total, counter changes to 2, and then we're asked to put in another value. So we'll put in 238. And you can see how today bottles just represents what the user enters, but total bottles, 638, but total bottles will accumulate all of the bottles that we're entering in. And counter continues to change. So far I've entered in 4. Now I'm going to begin my 5th entry, which is 1035. Now as you're going through this process and keeping track of your counter, one of the common errors is it running 1 too many times or 1 less time than it needs to run. So you want to ensure that just because your program runs does not mean that it's running properly. So you're going to keep track of counter. This is my 7th iteration, 536 I'll enter, and I only want it to run 7 times. So when counter is greater than 7, it turns to 8, and that particular program portion of the program ends. Now here, do you want to end the program? Yes, should end it. No, should start the process all over again. So you'll also want to check that. Now back in the lab, as you continue on by finishing main, what you want to do is add another module call that will, what that module call will do is calculate the payout, and the payout is 10 cents for the total bottles, and then you're going to have another module that will print the information. So you'll still have to complete the program, but those were the difficult portions.